I'm looking for the time up there. There it is.
Pipeline's rolling. We're on countdown in 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to another program in our series, Freethinking Forum. I'm delighted to have with me today Rev.Ashley Horan. Welcome to the program, Ashley.
Thank you, Bill. It's lovely to be here.
I know I could introduce you, but I bet you'd do a better job introducing yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Ashley Horan, and I am a Unitarian Universalist minister. My paid work is as the executive director of MUUSJA, the Minnesota Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Alliance, an organization
I'm
that
glad
has...
we don't have to say that.
Me too. We have a gesture,
MUUSJA,
MUUSJA, which helps people to remember it. I also do some work for an organization called the FAS Collaborative, which is housed out of Meadville Lombard Theological School, and I work with congregations that are working on issues of racial justice in a program called Beloved Conversations. So yeah, I do both of those things as a Unitarian Universalist community minister.
Good for you. And what brought you to ministry of religion?
I grew up at Unity Church in St. Paul.
A great place.
A great place indeed.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed. At the same time that I was going to Catholic school most of my life.
Catholic school?
Yes, indeed. And there were great gifts in both places, but it was Unitarian Universalism that really saved me in many ways as kind of a weird kid, as a kid who didn't believe in a lot of the theology that I was being taught at Catholic school. And I was a weird Unitarian Universalist kid because I actually loved church. A lot of kids love, the youth group and the activities, but I really loved church. And so as I grew older, I thought about the ministry. One of our ministers, as I was in high school, her name was Gretchen Thompson, and she was the first woman minister who I had ever seen, and that was around that time that I sort of started thinking about the ministry for myself. And as I got older, I began sort of considering whether I wanted to be a minister or a teacher. And long story short, I did a couple of years as a public school teacher and worked in a number of different kind of experiential education environments. And I decided that while I have the most profound respect for people who are lifetime public school teachers, that was not what I was called to do. And so I went to seminary, and here I am.
And you work as a social justice focused community minister. What is the connection between you and between social justice and faith?
For me, you can't talk about one without talking about the other. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition is deeply rooted in the idea that we practice our faith, that we live out our values, and that salvation, as other religions would talk about it, salvation comes by being in community with people and by working to create the world that we yearn for. So for me, the things that are most precious to me in our religious tradition, in Unitarian Universalism, are things like what used to be the radical doctrine of universal salvation, this idea that everybody is saved already, that nobody's going to be condemned to hell. And to me, we have to live that out in the world. We don't live in a world in which that is actually true for everybody.
Now, there's a lot of organizing and activism happening right now in the Twin Cities around racial justice and the movement for Black Lives Matter, especially following the police killing of Philandro Castillo on July 6th.
Yep.
When I invited you to be here, we were going to talk specifically about some of those events. But you told me today, though, that you won't be talking specifically about this on our program. Why is that?
Yeah. So one of the things that has happened a lot in the last number of years is that the media has taken the narrative that the Black organizers and Black leaders in the movement for Black Lives have been telling about their story, about their narratives, and have been twisting them. And the true story is not getting out there. They're asking other people, and in particular, white people who are working in solidarity with the movement, have too often been asked to be the voices, and their words are believed more than Black organizers' voices. And so the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement and other Black-led organizing groups here in the Twin Cities have asked all of us who are white folks to not do interviews with the media about what's happening on the ground here right now, because this is not actually a story about white people. This is a story about Black folks who are fighting for liberation. And so I want to respect that, and I want to explicitly say, go seek out Black voices and the Black people who are reporting on this, who are talking about these issues, who are writing, and you can find those in a lot of places, but it shouldn't be me that tells that story.
Good. That makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of white people wondering what they can do right now to support the movement for racial justice. What would you tell them?
First of all, I say hooray for asking the question. It's a question that a lot of us, I think, haven't had to ask for a long time. The first thing I would say is begin by thinking about, again, which voices are you listening to? Who's writing? Who's TV coverage? Whose photographs are you looking at? And if the answer isn't people of color, if the answer isn't Black leaders, then start seeking those out. That's just a very preliminary step. The second piece is get involved in community. There are so many people who are doing work on a lot of different fronts to further racial justice. And so this can look a lot of different ways. I mean, some people are really comfortable and called and skilled to be on the front lines, to lead protests, to do direct action, to do civil disobedience. But I realize that that's not for everybody. The thing that I like to talk about is that we all have to take shifts for the movement. And so it requires, for the governor's mansion shutdown to be happening, it needs people who are cooking food so that folks can be there. There are kitchen table conversations that you have with your cousins, with your parents, with your children, with your neighbors that are important in beginning to give us the muscles to really talk about race and about white supremacy in America. I would say that there are a lot of groups in particular for white people that are doing work around helping to organize white communities to show up in solidarity with Black-led liberation organizing. So,
could you mention a few of those?
Yeah, absolutely. The one that I would mention right here is a group called Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice. And there's a chapter here in the Twin Cities that I've been working with a little bit over the past couple of years. And
what's
Surge,
their website?
So if you go to surjmn.org, surjmn.org, it'll redirect to our Facebook page. But Surge is specifically about building community and leveraging white people's power to stand in solidarity with movements led by people of color. So there was a public meeting that Surge held yesterday afternoon, and about 400 people showed up for this public meeting. So I think there are a lot of people who are just yearning right now to know what to do, and people are scared, but we have to walk toward each other and figure out how to support each other as we begin to learn that this is a struggle that we have to be in. It's actually not a choice, even though we've been fooled into thinking that white people don't have anything to do with struggles for liberation for people of color.
I've known for a long time we do.
Yes.
I was in Selma, Alabama with Reverend Martin Luther King 52 years ago. But there are some people who say racial justice isn't the issue I'm most passionate about. I'm more concerned about LGBTQ liberation or environmental justice or economic justice. What would you say to that?
I would say I think we all find our ways through different paths. I learned a magnificent word recently, which is the word kyriarchy. Kyriarchy. And what kyriarchy means, it's the systems of oppressions. Economic injustice, racial injustice, environmental injustice, sexism, misogyny, transphobia, all these things that work together to keep people oppressed. So my take is, if you love the earth, if you feel inspired to fight for the planet that we have been given, I think it's impossible to do that effectively without also taking into consideration the ways that racism pushes us to harm the planet, to harm our environment. And so what I would say to people is that start where your heart is, start where your passion is, but begin to understand and look for ways to understand how LGBTQ rights are interconnected with racial justice, are interconnected with economic justice and environmental justice. And when we get there, we start talking about what folks like to call collective liberation, this idea that none of us is free until all of us are free. And so we have to address all of these different systems, even though that can feel overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, I think some people are overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And they try to put their go to work in one of these areas to bring about more justice, and feel like they have to ignore the other ones. But you're suggesting by this new word,
Kyriarchy.
that it's a system of oppression that we need to focus on changing, getting rid of.
Right, and it takes a lot of different people working in a lot of different ways, but I think what we really need is to say, all right, well, I'm going to be working on mining and fracking right now, but I'm also going to really pay attention to how this issue impacts women, to how this issue impacts people of color and indigenous people. And it's not to say that you have to tackle all of these systems all at the same time. It's just to say that I think our learning is deepened and our hearts are opened by understanding how these things play in together. And in fact, for me, it actually makes me feel more powerful because it makes it feel less like I have to compete with other people working on different issues for resources or understanding or attention, because it makes me feel like actually I'm part of a big human family that are all working to end these systems of oppression.
Yes, that's so important. But some people are asking, how can I learn more about these various social justice issues and how they intersect? It's confusing.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Who should I trust?
And I think what I would say to that is that the experts on all of these issues are the people who are most directly impacted by them. So to me, it doesn't make any sense that we would listen to a rich congressperson talk about how to end poverty more than somebody who is out of work and struggling to feed 5 kids, who lives in a community of people who are all struggling with the same issues. They probably know more about how poverty works and what are the obstacles to overcoming it than people who've never had any experience with that. The same goes for, we need to listen to people of color about ending racism. We need to listen to folks who are impacted by environmental injustice about what we need to do to fix those systems. And that information is out there, but you have to start seeking it. So for me, some people laugh at social media as a, sort of a frivolous thing, but I'm reading all of this writing, all of these, direct stories and testimonies, watching videos, reading blogs, reading posts by people who I'm able to be in community with on social media that don't live in my neighborhood, people who they don't go to my church, or they're not nearby me, but I am still able, because of the radical democracy of social media, to hear the stories of people. And I think what has happened to me, and I think happens to a lot of people, is that we begin, when we hear those stories again and again, we start to believe them in a way that we're trained not to believe people to be experts in their own lives by the mainstream media. So that's been an important practice for me.
So, well, let's talk some more about social media. What do you think is the role of social media is in the current landscape of social justice activism and organizing? It seems to be playing a more and more important role.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we would have seen anywhere near the success of any of the movements for justice that are happening right now if it weren't for social media, because people are using it literally as an organizing tool. So, I'm going to create a Facebook event, and I have a network of 10,000 people who like my Facebook page, and I will invite people to this event, and then people show up. So it's used to get people out in the streets. I think it's used to get people to sort of wake up to the things that are happening. We get information so much more quickly through social media than we can in other ways. And there aren't, the Rupert Murdochs of the world controlling the narrative on social media. So you begin to curate a series of sources that you can trust and whose experience and wisdom you can trust.
So, but I think also the fact that our cell phones now have video capability that is just amazing to me.
Absolutely.
And to carry it live on Facebook or another channel.
Yes.
But there are people who are not comfortable or interested in using Facebook or Twitter or other social media, but who still want to stay informed and get involved.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
I think the key piece of social media is the social part. And so what I would say to those folks is that if you're not able or interested in being on social media, you have to kind of double down with your in-person commitments. So join a congregation, go to your local city council meetings, figure out, go on meetup.com and find people, or, organize a block party, get to know your neighbors. And while you might not be the social media guru in your circle, I think there are people around you who can bring some of the knowledge and the wisdom that comes with that. And that way, I don't think social media will ever replace in-person relationships, but I think they're complementary. And so if you don't have access to, by choice or by necessity, to social media, I think you have to make an extra effort to connect in person with people who are living in the world, who are also out there and being a part of their neighborhoods and their communities.
Well, good. That sounds like good advice. But maybe there are some grandchildren who will help those of us that are still uncomfortable with social media.
But I do want to say, I don't think it's a purely generational divide. I know some young people who are really anti-social media, and I know some elders in my community who are better than I am at it. And so while certainly there are trends generationally, I don't think there are barriers to having access and knowing how to use it as an older person. I also don't think that you are born with the inherent capability or desire to use social media as a young person.
Now, another problem nowadays, there's so much turmoil happening right now in our country and around the world, really. Some people are feeling overwhelmed with the horrible news that seems to come day after day.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to people who are feeling hopeless or stuck?
I think that sense of hopelessness is so real for so many of us, and depending on where we come from and what our personalities are like, I think we channel that in very different ways. But what I do know is that being in community with other people saves us, and it even when we don't know the answers, sometimes there's something very hopeful about being in community with other people. So, and I mean that as simply as, sometimes turning off the news and taking a walk around the neighborhood. I mean that by, belonging to a church or, being a part of your neighborhood association or showing up at a protest that's happening in your neighborhood. Not even necessarily because you stand behind it, but because it's shifting the energy. It's allowing you to see people who are channeling their hopelessness into unity and into crying for a different way of being. So community is one answer to that question. I think the other answer to that question is spiritual practice, and that looks very different for various different people. But I think it's really important.
So, now, as a minister and social justice activist, what do you think the role of the church is in responding to the realities of the world we live in today? We've got about 10 minutes left. Okay. This could be a long sermon.
It sure could. In brief, I think the church in its purest forms, and I don't just mean Christian churches or churches as we've defined them in America, but I mean religious communities throughout time, faith communities, exist to help people come together to make meaning out of a world that throws a lot of really bad things at people and also a lot of beauty at people. And so we need each other to make meaning out of that. And so I think right now we're in a sort of sea change in what organized religion looks like in this country and around the world. And I think the churches that are, the religious communities that are doing something right, that are really getting it right, are the ones that are saying, this community is a place where you come to be refilled, where you come to find the resources that you need to go back out and be a really deeply engaged part of the world, to be an agent of change in this world that is so broken. And the flip side of that is that, that's a piece about equipping people to go out in the world. I think there's simultaneously a piece about being a refuge from the world, a place where people are able to come and be really radically accepted, radically part of community, radically embraced as beloved children of God, as many of the religious traditions would frame that. So I think you can't be too much one and too much the other to get it right. I think you got to be relevant. You got to figure out what people are doing in their lives. Maybe church doesn't look like being run by committees. Maybe it doesn't look like meeting on Sunday mornings all the time. But I think that people, no matter what their life status, no matter what their beliefs, they still want communities to help each other make meaning. And I think the church's role is to help that happen, to be relevant to what's happening in the world today, and then to figure out how to reshape itself so that it fits into the realities of people's lives today.
I've seen that happening in some churches. Solar Garden is another example of it. Many churches being organized to subscribe to the Solar Garden concept. So now you mentioned the spiritual practice.
Yeah.
How would you define spiritual practice? What do you think its role is for people who want to be engaged in healing the world?
Yeah. So my definition of spiritual practice is anything that you do regularly with attention and intention. So I think for many people it can look many, many different ways. For some people that's, maybe they run every day or they do yoga, some of those physical disciplines. For some people it looks like prayer or meditation, something contemplative or something to help connect them to something outside themselves. For some people it looks like deep spiritual partnership, having somebody in your life who you speak deeply with about issues that you don't talk about on that surface level that we live most of our lives on. For other people it looks like worship. It looks like coming together for a religious ritual or a service where people are trying together to make sense of the world. For some people I think it looks like activism. I think that is actually a spiritual practice, this idea of being in community with people and with attention and intention, figuring out how you show up again and again. And I think the role of spiritual practice is, I think we need a combination of those various different kinds of practice. But the role is not, I think spiritual practice is very different than the sort of Western concept of self-care, which is about, going to get a massage or like taking the night off to binge on Netflix. I think the difference is that spiritual care for me is something, or spiritual practice for me is something that we do out of necessity and out of a deep responsibility to keep showing up as fully as we can in the world. So if we don't tend to our own spirits, if we don't nurture resiliency, if we don't have the connections to something beyond just ourselves, then we're not able to show up effectively to work for justice. We get burned out, we get angry, we get bitter. And so it's about much more for me than that sort of self-indulgent, let's go shopping for an afternoon and forget about the cares of the world, but it's about how am I going to best prepare myself to be a part of forming the world that we yearn for.
Well, I find it's helpful to meditate on the question, what now in my life is most worthy of devoting my life to?
I love that question.
To my mind, that's worship.
Yes.
Learning to live out by what is most worthy of our devoting our time.
Yeah. Well, and you look at that word worship, which has at its root the word worth, of what is of ultimate worth.
Yeah.
And what do we devote ourselves to that is of ultimate worth? Yeah.
Yeah. And so what are your own spiritual practices?
It's a good question. For me, gardening is a spiritual practice. There's something, this last week was full of many, many things, and I was out doing a lot of work for organizing and activism in our city. And I just got home and I was like buzzing with energy, and I needed to calm down. And it wasn't going to happen by having conversation. It wasn't going to happen by watching TV or having a drink or anything. But literally putting my hands in the earth and connecting with things that were growing for me was incredibly important. It literally rooted me in a way that the plants were rooting. I like to worship in community as much as I can, to be a part of groups of people that are making meaning through liturgy, through art, through song, through reading. I pray. I'm a theistically, I'm a theist in the sense that I believe that I am a part of something much larger than me, but I'm a humanist in the sense that I believe that agency belongs with humans and not in some divine intercessor from outside. But I pray because what it does is it gets me out of the illusion that I am the end answer to all of the problems that I see around me, and it helps me to feel more connected to things beyond myself. So those are a few of my spiritual practices.
Well, good. We've got about 3 minutes left, and given all the horrible things that are happening everywhere around us, what gives you hope? Can you capsule that in 3 minutes?
Let's hope I can. I think I would say it's the resiliency and the ingenuity and the audacious imagination of human beings. Mm-hmm. I keep saying to people, I hate that our city has had to get so good at responding to trauma and horror and pain. Yeah. But what gives me hope is seeing the ways that we are doing that, and that we've developed an infrastructure for doing that, because people's deepest impulse is to take care of each other, and to do that while struggling for larger justice issues, and to create a system in which all of us can be free. And so that it's that resiliency, it's that unwillingness to give up and to say, we will be numb, we were going to check out, we're going to leave this struggle. But again and again, no matter how tired we are, I see people coming back and saying, because I love you, because we are in community together, I'm going to keep showing up no matter how tired I am, no matter how hopeless I feel, and that's where the hope lives for me.
Well, actually, when I had the choice of moving anywhere in the world to raise my family, I chose here, the Twin Cities, Minnesota.
Yep.
Because I think that a good many people work on foreseeing problems and building the structures, the infrastructure that will be ready in case something happens.
Yes.
I've been a chair of an emergency preparedness committee.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is just one of many facets of preparation for doing justice. Yeah. And not letting things get out of hand.
Yep.
You've been a really great inspiration here today. And is there some closing word that you have for folks?
I think I would just say that in order to do this work, we need to know that we're all deeply loved, and that love won't let us go. And I think what I say about that is that we need to be the reflections of that love to each other. Sometimes that looks like righteous anger. Sometimes it looks like, can I bring you a cup of coffee and give you something from my garden? But we need to be the extenders of that love to one another.
Yes. Well, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. I'll hope to have you back again.
Thank you.
Sometime.
That would be great.
I wonder, we can have on to respond to some questions about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Take care, Bill.